Okay, Bob Chiarelli, thanks very much for coming to our editorial board today.
Well, thank you for having me.
As you know, editorial boards are all on the record. What we'll do is we'll give you a minute or two for an opening statement, and then we're just going to ask you some questions until we run out of time.
Okay, sounds good.
Carry on.
Well, first of all, I can guarantee that I have not been nor will be the most exciting mayor you'll ever have. However, I successfully dealt with the ice storm. I successfully dealt with the city amalgamation. I successfully dealt with the original O-Train project without problems or crises. I successfully froze property taxes as regional chair and mayor for 6 years, after which there were 3 modest increases. I successfully held 4 senior cabinet portfolios in our provincial government. I was the first mayor in Canada to implement no smoking in public places. And I was fortunate to have excellent councillors and managers. And I'm confident I can build a strong administration and council to meet unprecedented cumulative challenges, which are, first, stabilize the city's finances. We're a $6.2 billion corporation with 17,000 employees, a $3.5 billion debt, and we pay $240 million in interest every year. We have over $300 million of court cases. Likely we will lose them. We have an LRT system that is dysfunctional with escalating costs, unreliable service, and unpredictable future. We have an OC Transpo bus service that is bleeding costs, losing revenue, and providing really bad service. We have a road system that is worn out or ruined because of age and neglect. We have a downtown and market area that need a creative and committed revival. Now, do you want a mayor with absolutely no experience in government? Or do you want a mayor with experience as mayor, regional chair, and provincial minister in 4 senior cabinet portfolios? The size and scale of our city's challenges are unprecedented and will require experienced leadership.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Gets us started. Nicole, you want to start, sir?
Sure. So you've been cabinet minister, mayor, regional chair, among many other things. Why do you want this job now?
Well, that's a very common question. I'm a citizen like any other citizen. I happen to have a lot of political experience. There's a strong consensus that there are a lot of things moving in the wrong direction, and I'm part of that consensus. Having the experience that I have, having a large extended family, being born and raised in the city, I care for this city. And I indicated earlier that I've been in 11 elections. I've lost 2, and I've won 9. And when I run, I'm ready for either outcome. And I'm running for a reason. I feel I have something to contribute, and I think I have.
I think one of the questions, though, is why now after accomplishing a lot, right? I mean, you've seen pretty well everything that one can see in politics, right? There's not too much that would surprise you.
My question is, why not? I've been interested in politics since my high school days. I went to university at Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York. I took business administration, but the real reason I went there is they had a lot of courses that were based in politics and history and so forth, and I found that desirable moving forward. I managed 4 federal election campaigns for Lloyd Francis, who ended up being speaker. I was very active in politics. My father was very active in politics, and he, when I was 16 and I got my driver's license, he had me driving people to the polls, and I really, really enjoyed it. When I was at University of Ottawa Law School, we had almost every single student was politically inclined. And what we used to do in our breaks, or what we used to do when we played hooky, we would walk over to Parliament Hill and watch Diefenbaker and Pearson fighting like cats and dogs. So I was interested in politics, and I found out that I was effective in politics.
Okay. Nicole, do you want to follow up on that, or should we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right, Taylor, it's all yours.
So, Bob, as you know, you'll have strong mayor powers bestowed by the province if you end up in the mayor's office when the new council term begins. So, you've raised the possibility of using a strong mayor veto to make happen your desire for an urban boundary freeze, with an exception for the Canada Northlands. Is there anything else that you're considering using those powers for at this point?
I likely wouldn't even use them for that, because I'm really not supportive of the new the new powerful mayor's situation from Queen's Park. I'm a consensus builder, and I'm a facilitator. In every elected position that I've had, I spent between 50 and 55% of my time facilitating. If it was on a municipal scene, it was a councillor having a disagreement with a staff person. It was two staff persons not being able to agree. If it was a business person coming in and not getting good service. I spent a lot of time facilitating and creating solutions and making things run smoothly.
And given that position and given your feelings about the strong mayor powers, why not rule out their use? Why not say I'm committing? They're not something I'm going to take advantage of or use in my term if elected.
Well, I'll do it here now, because the mentioning it in the first instance was not with a lot of attention, but I've given it some significant thought, and I would not use the powers.
At all?
I didn't need the powers when I was a mayor or regional chair.
Right. So you're committing today that
Yes.
as mayor, Bob Chiarelli
Yes.
would not use for
Yes.
anything
Yes.
strong mayor powers. Okay. Thank you for that clarity. So pivoting a little bit, you've taken the position, and very strongly today with your housing platform release, that intensification is not appropriate in most single-family neighborhoods in the city, and you don't support an end to the R1 zoning that keeps them that way. Why not open these neighborhoods up to more people as Ottawa's population continues to grow? What's wrong with allowing 2 semi-detached homes, for instance, where only one can be built now?
It's a balancing act. We have a city right now that has single residential houses. Homeowners bought them, and they were anticipating living in that type of a neighborhood, and they've gone too far with it. I mean, the jargon used by the critics is ending exclusionary or R1 zoning, and candidate McKenney, for example, promises to champion that outcome and go 100% all the way. On June 20th, 22, city staff report says R1 neighborhoods, quote, must be rezoned to permit at least 2 and in some cases up to 4 units per lot with relatively few exceptions. That would end existing single-family neighborhoods. So I have some empathy for people who bought homes in single-family neighborhoods who end up not being in a single-family neighborhood. And that's the bottom line. And I think there's a strong consensus among voters who own single-family homes to do that. Having said that, I'm very, very supportive of intensification. I want to see intensification take place as much as it can, but without this little hiccup in it. But so that's basically my position. I believe, for example, that there's so many roads, thoroughfares that have commercial properties on them. They have warehouses on them. There's if you look at Carling Avenue, if you look at Westgate Shopping Center, Carlingwood, and the other shopping center that's further west, they're all intensifying. They're intensifying now without any change in the law. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity for intensification, which we should use and take advantage of.
A real point of tension, though, over, not just this last council term, but I think for quite some time, has been that intensification is quite concentrated, right, in some areas, whereas others see almost nothing.
Well, in terms of where the intensification took place, Mr. Willis, who was the planning commissioner for the city, said publicly and openly in public meetings, that we have between 10 and 15 years worth of land to put houses on. Okay, so there's no imperative that we rush to it right away. That's number one. However, I have taken the position that I don't support extending the urban boundary. I initiated the urban boundary when I was first mayor. That's part of my responsibilities was to look at the planning for the new city, and that's one thing that we did. And that philosophy has continued to today, except now that there's enough land available. The other issue is, with respect to this, is that if you have intensification and it's away from services, the housing is much more expensive. If you look at the T-Win situation, for example, which I thought was inappropriate because there was no services nearby. The terrain was not satisfactory for housing. They were not within any reasonable reach of transit in any way, shape, or form. So if the expansion of the urban boundary is going to take place on very exceptional circumstance, perhaps, there's got to be services there. Otherwise, if you move it away, the houses are going to be more expensive. You've got to put sewer and water. It's more expensive to bring transit to that particular site.
Can I just jump in there? Sorry. So you're not going to use strong mayor powers, presumably because you think they're not particularly democratic. But you also want the provincial government to delay the official plan, which was democratically approved by the last council. So I'm just wondering if you're kind of picking and choosing your powers here a little bit, Mr. Chiarelli?
Well,
I get what you're saying about the Taywin lands and the logic behind it, but you would actually ask the province to interfere in what council has said.
There's another side of the democratic issue, okay? And that is you're having a minimum of 10 people who didn't participate who are going to be engaging in something they didn't participate in. And to me, that's non-democratic. It's something similar to those people who are saying that they shouldn't select the chief of police now because the numbers don't work out. You have my guess is you're going to have 12 or 13 new people on council, and they will be moving into something that was created by another council that was voting for future councillors, basically.
Okay, no, that makes some sense. So that brings me to, I guess, the culture of council, for want of a better expression. You've talked about yourself as a facilitator and a consensus builder, and like everybody else in town, you've seen how the last council actually functioned, which is to say a lot of polarization, a lot of acrimony. So what happens under a Bob Chiarelli council that prevents that from being the case again? I mean, a lot of the same people will be reelected.
It'll be very similar to what I've done in the past, okay? Because I made rules for myself. First of all, every day I get up, I put an invisible P on my head for patience, okay? For the political reality. So I don't get upset and I don't let things upset me. Secondly, I tell the councillors I've got an open door policy. You know where my office is? You can walk up and talk to me any time of the day or any day. If I'm tied up, my staff will give you a time later in the day or the next morning. I spend every year a minimum of 3 times. I invite the councillors in to talk to me, tell me what do they need in their ward? How can I help you accomplish what you want to do in your ward? Again, say I'm a facilitator. I spend a lot of time facilitating. There's a lot of friction in the administration, between the administration and some members of the public, between the politicians and some members of the public, and I facilitate. And I'm reasonably good, if not very, very good at it. And I would continue that in the future.
Bob, I'm curious. I wasn't around at the time, but from what I read of your previous mayoralty, you know, it wasn't always like kumbaya. Is there anything you look back on and say that was a function or how I approached the job at the time previously as mayor of Ottawa that I would change and do differently this time that I've learned from and wouldn't repeat?
I would just go forward with the same principles to pick. Give me an example of what you might be talking about.
No, I just wondered if there was anything specific that you yourself kind of have said, I wouldn't, I'm changing this approach, or I'm doing this
No,
differently
I
than
like the approach I had. And not only that, I had that same approach when I was a minister, okay, in the 4 different portfolios. You get the same type of conflicts, and I also took some courses on facilitation as well. And so, I consider myself peaceful, I consider myself friendly, I consider myself as accommodating socially.
So speaking of those ministerial portfolios, you're a Liberal, you are a Liberal. The provincial government is, of course, Tory, very, very Mr. Ford and company. If you're the mayor and a well-known Liberal, how does that relationship work? Because that's, of course, absolutely essential to the success of the city.
I'm nonpartisan. I'll give you how I worked as a minister. So in the minister, you've got the legislature, you've got the government on this side, you've got the opposition party on the other side, and every day after question period, somebody would walk across the hall and say, here's a file in Renfrew or whatever it is, this person has a serious issue, could you help us out? I said, okay. I take the information, go back to my office, give it to my chief of staff, and say, call that member's chief of staff and see what we can do to resolve the problem. I resolve problems for Liberals, for NDP, and Conservatives, so much so that I've got calls from John Yakubuski and a few others saying, how can we help you out? Okay, that sort of thing. He's a Conservative.
So sounds like, just before I pass to Joanne, sorry, I'm monopolizing things here, an open door policy, how does that also translate into better accountability and better transparency to Ottawa voters, right? Because a lot of the acrimony in the last council was people like Diane Deans and others saying, you're not telling us what's going on with LRT contracts, you're not giving people information. So what's your own strategy going to be about making sure that taxpayers, voters, understand at a deeper level and a more open level what's going on?
Totally transparent. I mean, I share things. I work at getting the information out because I think that's the right thing to do. And that's the principle that I use moving forward.
So we've got P3 contracts that have, you know, necessary secrecy clauses and things in them. These seem to be the things that really upset people, right? That, you know, there is a lot of spending on a big ticket item, and legal says, and, you know, the city's legal affairs team says, we cannot divulge that information. You know, we can't. There's a legal constraint on us. And yet the public is very frustrated because they have no idea what's going on here. I mean, what, aside from telling me you're going to do it, what can you do? I guess that's what I'm trying to, I'm trying to see if there's kind of an accountability or transparency policy or specific measures you're thinking about.
Well, 3 Ps are very complex, okay? And more often than not, they're very effective, okay? And on that point, I don't want to leave that point. So the Bell's Sensplex is a 3P. The Gary Armstrong Long-Term Care Center on Porter Island is a 3P. The Emergency Measures Building was a 3P. Public-private partnerships can work really well. The first train that we did, the north-south train, was a 3P as well. There were no problem. Okay, I was Minister of Infrastructure, responsible for 3Ps at Queen's Park, and very, very seldom did you see that issue of disclosing or not disclosing cause a problem. You will find, I also spent 16 years practicing law, commercial law. So you understand that under certain circumstances, that particularly if it's a competition, you have to do something secretly. Okay, so I don't criticize 3 Ps generally. I do criticize the 3 Ps we had here for our LRT very, very significantly, because a lot of things were done improperly. A lot of things were done improperly.
I'd start with a lot of things were done secretly that apparently didn't have to be done secretly because eventually
Yes,
the
there
information
were a
was
lot of
made
things that were
available
done
to the public.
secretly that
So-
should not have been done secretly.
Right.
Okay, so there are some things that qualify, and there's a lot of things that don't qualify for the secrecy.
I guess I'm kind of, I won't belabor the point too much longer, but are you going to be the kind of mayor who is open by default, if I can use that expression, it is used in the transparency.
Open-minded, sorry?
Open by default, which means everything should be available to the public unless there's a specific reason, concrete reason it should not be. This is a concept we talk about a lot in journalism because
Especially-
governments promise it and then they don't do it.
But especially when all the parties agree that it would be secret or non-disclosed. So if all the parties agree, it's a contractual contract, and they should have the option to do that, including a government. I mean,
Okay. Okay, no, that's fair enough. Thank you. Joanne?
I have a couple of questions. One of them stems from what Taylor was asking you. We've seen that populations have leapfrogged outside of Ottawa. We've seen that some of the fastest growing towns in Canada are right outside Ottawa. What do you think about that?
I think it's terrible. The reason why I say it's terrible is because I was Minister of Municipal Affairs, okay? And I saw what was happening in all the Eastern Ontario townships and municipal entities. They basically would not plan. Just before I left as Minister of Municipal Affairs, okay, I had arranged a meeting with all the rural heads of council to talk about how you do planning in that territory. When you're talking about Kingston, you're talking about Arnprior, you're talking about all, there's no planning. It's helter-skelter. It's bad. And I tried to fix that, okay? And what I see now is if you go to Campville, it's a disaster, number one. Number two, you're getting people leaving Ottawa to go there, and they're being part of bad planning, quite frankly. So that's...
What, if anything, can Ottawa do about that?
Well,
I mean, these people are on our roads.
When I tried to initiate a process to do planning around Eastern Ontario, I spoke to, so I was at Queen's Park, and we had, people holding positions at the city, and I asked them if they wanted to get involved in the dialogue, because first of all, if you're looking at transportation, you look at the transportation coming into Ottawa, they come through Ottawa, should there be a way that they avoid Ottawa and drive around Ottawa, there's parking issues and that sort of thing. They didn't want to talk about it. So the Ottawa side didn't want to talk about it. And a lot of the rural people didn't want to talk about it. Now, what's his name, the Minister of Municipal Affairs now? Steve Clark. Yeah. Steve Clark basically opposed that planning. He opposed the planning because he said, you know what, if we went along and we did our municipal planning this way, Ottawa would try to take control of all the industry. Okay, so he thought he would lose industry by doing that. Anyway, it doesn't make sense, but I got along well with him, incidentally.
Marco?
I'm going to ask something very timely, and that definitely relates to crime and law and order. If you're the mayor next year, what happens to the Panda game?
I haven't given it any thought, but let me think about it for a moment or two. I'd enforce the law. I'd enforce the law. I would, if I were mayor, okay, I would basically speak to the decision makers at Carleton and University of Ottawa, try to encourage them to do everything that they possibly could including creating some kind of sanction. They should respect the law like everybody else. They could easily predict what was going to happen. It was predictable every single time they've had it. And so on that basis, there should have been cooperation.
Do you think that the two institutions should be sanctioned for what happened this year and then last year as well?
Well, the institutions didn't do anything themselves. The students did it. So the institutions, they might not have been, they didn't act responsibly, but I don't think it was a legal issue.
So if it's not a legal issue, what kind of thing can you do in future? I mean, the police had a press conference last week, told us they were all ready for the Panda game. They did lay lots of charges. There were more of them out on the street, but it didn't stop anything,
There are
really.
circumstances when you can anticipate things happening, like what happened with the truckers, okay? So I would make a strong effort so that it wouldn't happen again. And that would be dialogue. It could be facilitation. The facilitation could include, you know, the student executives who are.
You're not suggesting, though, that the game itself should be canceled?
No, I wouldn't say we had authority. I mean, they have a right to have a football game. I don't have a right to tell them not to have a football game.
Marco, did you have follow-up?
Maybe the owners of Lansdowne Park, whoever they might happen to be, might do something.
I just wanted to go in a bit of a different direction. So you did mention the truckers convoy, and there was obviously a lot of controversies that prompted, especially some of these really acrimonious discussions on the Police Services Board. We've had one candidate say that they vowed to sit on the board. So I'll put that question to you: would you sit on the Police Services Board if elected mayor?
No.
Why not?
No. My sense is there should be some independence between the senior political person.
Okay, you're good there?
Yes.
Can I just follow up on policing then? And I'll pass it back over to Nicole after that. When I looked through your platform online, I didn't see a lot of detail on policing, other than you are concerned about the ratio, I think, of police to population here. So it kind of leads me to think, is it essentially your is your public safety platform essentially let's hire more cops?
No.
Okay,
No.
tell me.
I've got in front of me here 2 releases that we're going to release on policing within the next 48 hours. And I could share them with you.
Please do.
Okay? There's one on the process for a new chief, and one on mental health and police. Okay? On August 2nd, this is going to be going out. On August 2nd, the Ottawa Police Services Board announced they were starting interviews for the new police chief. They indicated they should complete the process in late September or early October. We know there's a deep mistrust of the police after the convoy fiasco this winter. We need to restore the trust of the public in their police service. The police needs to believe that the force will work to protect. The public needs to believe that the force will work to protect them and will act in their best interest. This healing is not accomplished by a hiring process that is done behind closed doors. I call upon the Police Services Board to stop the hiring process until after the new council takes place. And when it restarts, it should include a significant engagement with council and the public. This is needed to start the healing process between the public and the police. So that's what I would be suggesting in my release.
Essentially, if I understand that, that would be sort of, let's take some steps backwards, do more consultation first before we start interviewing candidates? More
It's
public
saying that
consultation?
the new council should be doing the selecting.
Okay, so that would actually start the whole process over, is that right?
Well, we don't know when it's going to end even, and the way it's proceeding in a very, very semi-secret way. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. You said the whole council, it's usually done just by the Police Services Board,
What is just done?
the hiring of the police chief.
The police, the board hires the police.
Right.
So that's an internal issue with the board
Mm-hmm.
and the chair of the board, how they internally decide what they're going to do.
Yeah, I'm just asking, I'm a little bit slow here. You're suggesting that that process should start over once the new council is in place?
When the new council is in place, yes,
Okay,
yes.
got it, thank you.
I'm saying they should stop now. They've been dragging on, and they end up appointing maybe in November, with virtually no time for a new council to come in. So you have this old council doing all the work and all the background and everything else, and then the next thing you know, you wake up in the morning and there's a whole different team that's working with that police chief. So I think there's some concern about that.
What's your second release there?
Okay. I believe we have not been well served by the system when there are 9/11 wellness calls. The current approach needs to be significantly improved for the safety and security of both the police and the people involved in the dangerous situations the police are called in for. I propose that we create a partnership between the Ottawa Police Service and the Royal Ottawa Hospital, whereby the ROH puts together a roster of perhaps 10 to 15 mental health professionals who can be called upon to join the police response. And I just want to interrupt myself here. Right now, you don't have professionals engaged. You have social service people, et cetera, and there's a huge difference in terms of how you respond under certain circumstances. The mental health professional from the list who is available at the time of the call would put on a vest to identify them clearly and go to the scene of the incident. Protocols would have been developed on how the team handles the often dangerous situation. But we should go even further. 5 years ago, I proposed, when I was at Queen's Park, to the Attorney General, I proposed that we should pursue more diligently those drug dealers who sell their addictive products to our most vulnerable residents, and especially those who add toxic chemicals like fentanyl. So overdose. So what I was saying is, and I likened it to manslaughter, you might drive carelessly and injure somebody. You're going to be charged with manslaughter. If you're selling dope, okay, if you're selling dope, and one reason or another you have an accident, you're the pusher, and you end up killing somebody, they should be charged with manslaughter, the same as that person who drove carelessly. Now, I understand about 3 or 4 weeks ago, that happened for the first time. But I think that should be a general process. There's got to be a follow-up where when somebody dies from an overdose, you've got to try to investigate or track who sold them the stuff. And they got to be charged because they killed somebody or they were participating negligently in killing somebody, the same as somebody who negligently drives a car. And what I'm saying is, I think that should become part of the regimen for that situation. It amounts to manslaughter, and that's what I'm saying. So they're causing the death of a person. So I think that should go forward, and I would advocate for that.
Have you had anyone in the police world tell you that's feasible?
I consulted former chiefs of police when I came up with that idea several years ago. I consulted with somebody I know really well, who was the Attorney General. His name was Yasser Naqvi, who didn't think that was a good idea, and I disagreed with him. So I'm stubborn sometimes.
What about the feasibility of basically getting mental health professionals to, be available when we already know there's a healthcare worker shortage? Is that a feasible plan?
It could be feasible. Yes, it could be feasible. There are people who have recommended that, and it's actually happened in a couple of places as well. City of Toronto, for example, has an arrangement with an institution where there are medical people collaborate with the police. That's not unknown. And the RCMP up north, I forget what the city was, they did the same thing. Okay, so it's not creating new ground here. It's been done, and we did research into it. We shared the research with Brian Ford and Larry Hill, former chief of police and deputy chief. So, I mean, this is done with some consultation. It's not just out of my head.
I know. I guess I didn't mean really so much logistically, but perhaps that would come with a higher price tag, and just in general, we know that getting assistance for mental health can be really problematic because there's so few mental health professionals in a city this size with acute mental health issues. Is it really something we can actually do, and is this something we can really afford?
Well, there are mental health professionals who, under some circumstances, have been able to do both. I mean, they can sign up to do it. So I'm saying there has to be some work to go into this, but I think it's worthwhile because the kids are dying in the street, and people are killing them, and we're letting the people kill them. So I want to stop that.
Is the Royal on board with
Sorry?
your the Royal? You said they're the partner, the
So I'm
hospital.
suggesting that they be the partner.
Okay, and
I've done some significant discussion with George Langill, who's the former CEO of the Royal Ottawa Hospital.
okay. But no one in the current leadership of the hospital who said yet that
No.
let's partner up with.
No,
Okay.
no. This is a proposal to try to make it happen.
Thanks. Nicole, do you have anything, or shall I pass it to you?
I do have, we asked our readers to send in a few questions for all the mayoral candidates, so I'm going to ask one of those. And it has to do with kind of the city's recreation budget and diversity. So the city's own data on usage and demographics show that its emphasis on building and maintaining hockey rinks doesn't meet the recreation needs of our changing city. So there's not one city-owned standard basketball or volleyball gymnasium in central Ottawa, for example. Award-winning basketball coach Manak Lual has pointed out that many hockey rinks get built in the suburbs, while low-income residents who live in the city within the Greenbelt and play basketball don't get what they need. So as mayor, what will you do to ensure that recreation budgets reflect equity, current and future needs for all Ottawa citizens, especially low-income populations in the core? And that question came from Leo B. Doyle, who lives in Old Ottawa South.
The city of Ottawa has a very significant infrastructure deficit. Okay, it's the same as the roads. They've not been looked after. They've not been supported. From the physical point of view, that needs to be rectified. The same as the roads are going to be fixed, the infrastructure has to be fixed, particularly when it impacts on the youth of the city. So I would take significant steps to resolve that. I played a lot of hockey on outdoor rinks, okay, and so I know what it's like, and I know what it's like when they're not around.
Does significant steps mean building basketball courts?
Sorry?
Does that mean building basketball courts?
Well, we have a few basketball courts. I mean, outside.
Basketball
you've got the
gymnasiums, I
posts.
think, like indoor facilities in Ottawa's.
Well, indoor facilities, typically, we've had partnerships with the schools, and the schools have made the gyms available after hours on weekends, and I didn't know they'd stop that. That's how we did it when I was mayor.
Okay. Nicole, did you have a follow-up on that, or shall I pass to Taylor here?
Go right ahead.
Yeah. I know you got 10 questions, so do I.
Another question about an element of your housing platform, again released today. So you've said you would stop the plan to implement inclusionary zoning, which is a policy tool that would require that new housing developments that meet certain criteria in certain transit-adjacent areas of the city include a specific amount of housing deemed affordable. So does that mean you wouldn't want the city to implement any version of inclusionary zoning in your time as mayor, or is there something else you're proposing instead?
We're talking about
Inclusionary zoning. Yeah.
Inclusionary, yeah.
Yep.
Inclusionary zoning, if it's done on the basis that it's causing a negative to somebody else, okay? Because the reduction that you give on the inclusionary side makes the other people pay more money. Okay, the developer basically is going to get the return by raising it, and that's in fact what happens. The person who's doing the buying, the normal buying rather than the subsidized buying, ends up paying the costs or some of the costs for the development. So there's a win-lose situation with inclusionary zoning.
I do have a question about that though, because never once has that been something city staff have flagged as a concern. Yes, it is something that development industry frequently argues will be an outcome of this policy. Staff suggest, the concern potentially is that the feasibility of development proceeding, but not that these costs will be passed along to everybody else.
There's a generic sense out there that we have to try to keep the cost of housing down, okay? So here we're making the cost of housing go up. That's the result, okay?
But, is there any evidence that that's actually what happens? Would
Yes.
developers not price?
No, absolutely there's lots of evidence of that.
But it isn't something staff have flagged as a concern, like our professional city staff.
The professional city staff know the outcome, but they haven't done anything about it. And I'm not even necessarily saying they should do something about it, but I'm saying that that's the result of inclusionary zoning. You get developer X over here. He builds X number of units. Okay, he's required to sell these at or rent them at less a price. Okay, then they're not ready to donate their own income at this particular point in time.
I don't want to get stuck on this for too long, but those other units that you're saying then the price would go up, why would the developer be discounting them in the first place if they think their buyer's willing to pay that higher price?
Because they can negotiate a higher price. They sell at a higher price.
But would they
Simple
not
as that.
initially price them at the highest possible price that the market can bear?
No.
I could debate with you about this, I'm sure. But so to that point, though, so you're saying no inclusionary zoning under Bob, we're going to stop that work because as you know, not in place yet, but the city's moving towards it. So you would just stop that and say we're putting this aside.
I think that area has to be negotiated and discussed moving forward to see what the solutions could be. The reality is, for a home buyer, they're paying more. For a home buyer, they're paying more. So that seems unfair. Okay, so there needs to be some intervention on how that's going to be processed. It's not something that is attractive, but it's something that happens in reality. It's something that should be dealt with.
Okay, so you're not closing the door to inclusionary zoning completely, but you're saying there needs to be, let's continue the conversation.
No, that's right.
Okay.
Yes.
I feel like you guys could have like an hour-long debate here about
could.
this. Mr. Chiarelli, I want to ask you a couple of questions about healthcare.
Yes.
In your platform, you talk about creating a healthcare task force
Yes.
at the city level. What would it do? What is your idea there?
It's not 100% my idea, okay? George Langill, who was the CEO of the ROH, he's also a healthcare consultant, did some talking with some of his fellow doctors, and they feel that there are parts of the healthcare system that are not being properly dealt with, okay? For example, community health centers, they could be done better. Senior care could be done better, okay? So they're basically saying that there needs to be a professional oversight in how to make the system work more cooperatively, more efficiently. And they proposed, and it's George Langill, it was Dr. Cameron, who is the CEO of there's a former vice president of Montfort. I think there's 5 of them We've had some meetings. I had a meeting with them about how could they create more efficiencies in the system by observing it, recommending it, moving forward. And I thought it was a good idea, and it's not done yet. They're still going to have some discussions moving forward to do that.
Could you just give me an example at the city level of the kind of thing that kind of task force might be examining or looking at? I'm just looking for a concrete example here so I can understand it a bit more.
It could be seniors living alone, for example. That could be one example.
Okay. Also on healthcare, the new civic hospital, I think you're on record as not liking the idea of the city giving it $100 million. Is that correct?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, what did you say?
That.
Thank you.
I said there may be ways where they could. No, let me roll it back again. The meeting I had with Dr. Cameron, I raised the issue with him. So he's the CEO of the hospital, and he said, it doesn't have to be what it looks like, okay? He said, down the road, that number could change, okay? So they're basically asking for a number that is not based on anything specific moving forward. So the other thing is, what happens when you live in an older house and you buy a newer house? You sell the older house and you get some money and you build a newer house. So in this case, you've got an old 100-year-old hospital, okay, that's on its last legs. And you've got, what's the number for the new hospital? 4.5 billion or something in that area? And $4.5 billion. My thought was maybe they could use some of the resources of the old building, sell it, have somebody buy it for some kind of development or whatever, take the money and put it towards a new one. In this case, they're going to presumably try to keep the old hospital, put more money into the old hospital. It's very, very expensive to upgrade it. They may have the possibility of generating some funds from it and contributing to it. Anyway,
But still there was an ask to the city, to city council, to approve a certain amount of money that the city would put into the new civic campus.
I spent a lot of time in Toronto as an MPP, and I knew about a lot of things that were going on, okay, including new hospitals and new sewage treatment services, et cetera, et cetera. And my recollection is for 3 hospitals that were built, newly built, city councils put up the money that was asked for because they thought that that was the right thing to do. Just the right thing to do.
So
They didn't argue. They didn't say no.
So is it the right thing to do here?
They didn't say, well, you know, that's still out there for discussion. Still out there for discussion.
So what I'm hearing is your answer to the question is I'm thinking about it. Is that, which is a fair answer. I just want to make sure I understand it.
I think there may be ways and means to make it happen.
To make the city contribution happen.
To make the city contribution happen, yes.
Okay. But still thinking about what those would be or what the possibilities are.
Not in a lot of detail at this point.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. And one more thing sort of tangentially related to healthcare, which is the fallout from COVID. So we have public servants who have not gone back downtown except for maybe 2 days a week, depending on what Treasury Board tells them. If you were the mayor, would you be expecting or ordering city employees to return to their offices?
If I were mayor, I wouldn't be working alone. Okay, you've got the federal government, you've got some large corporate entities, and they're all in the same situation. So what concerns me, and what concerned me for a while, maybe I'm still concerned about it, is that I learned that the federal government was going to unofficially have 25% of their employees work remotely, and they were actually implementing that. No collaboration with the city in any way, shape, or form. No collaboration with NCC employees in any shape or form. So one of the problems we have is not getting the right people in the same room at the same time. That's another one of my principles of being involved in politics. So I would get all of the entities in the same room at the same time and see if they can come up with a solution. As I said earlier, I don't know, where did I put it? One of the serious problems we have is the dying of our downtown. I mean, that's very, very serious. I mean, happened to be talking to Terry Matthews, and most of you will know, and he said, and now he's out in Canada, and that's where all his operations. He says, I'm really concerned about the downtown, what's going to happen, and particularly for small business people. You've got some people in the government who are permitted to do it one way, and some people in the government, a different department or a different division, trying to do it a different way. It's a dog's breakfast, and there's no cooperation, there's no coordination. It's our city. I mean, you have Yasser Naqvi, you said, we're going to get some people together and see what we're going to do, revitalize. Yasser Naqvi and some volunteers and a few people are not going to solve the problem. The problem's got to be solved with decision makers at the table in the same room at the same time. It's not happening.
Quickly, Bob, I want to chat about taxes. Obviously, it was the very first promise, I believe, that you unveiled during this campaign period quite early. So in your time as mayor previously of Ottawa, you froze tax increases for 3 years, and then we saw from the numbers, I was looking back at our archives, property taxes rose by 3% in 2004, 3.9% in 2005, and then 4.5% in 2006. So with this tax freeze that you've promised for year one of a new mandate, what assurance, if any, can you offer Ottawa taxpayers that you won't just kick to later in the mandate, even heftier increases than the 3% that people are somewhat accustomed to now under Mayor Watson?
A lot depends on the circumstances at the time, okay, as you're going through it. My recollection of the taxes is that they didn't go up that much the last 3 years, in any case. So you had tax freezes for 6 years, and we were very, very deliberate in how we spent our money, how we chose our projects, so on and so forth. What I said, and I'll read it specifically, I have promised that I will deliver to Council a budget in the first year that has no property tax increase and no new spending. To be very clear, that means all city departments will have their budgets frozen at 2022 levels. There will be no incremental increases in 2023, except healthcare, social services, and seniors. On day one, I will call for outside experts to do a 100-day line-by-line review of the books that will help us make a path forward. This will buy us time to identify priorities, what we absolutely must do, what we can do without, or put off to another day. We're going to cancel the purchase of electric buses, postpone new road building, and fix and repair roads with some of the fundings from that. What we're looking at is basically a pause to find out how bad our finances are. If you walk in there and you walk in there with the status quo, you're going to be continuing burning yourself in the red. And so the idea basically is to stabilize the financing, stabilize what we're doing before we take the next step forward. That's really what it's all about.
So there's really no certainty you can offer voters right now about any increases for years 2, 3, 4, given what you've said about we need to take stock of the situation and then make a decision, you know, going forward.
So you said 2, 3, 4?
Like years 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do, we'll try to do what we did at regional government and what we did at with the amalgamated city, and that is try to be diligent in terms of how we operate things, how we proceed with initiatives. There's some things that are good to have. There's some things that are good to have later, some things good to have now. So we did a lot of that. We had a very, very good council. We had a council that came from all over the place, from Nepean and Gloucester and so on and so forth. And we were able to come to the table and we were able to come to an agreement. So we don't need that stadium now, or we don't need that thing now. We can postpone it. So we can go through the same process with the new council. It's not automatic.
Right, but for those who would like to know, you know, before they go to the ballot box, what under Bob Chiarelli would we see when it comes to our property taxes for years 2, 3, 4? As I understand it, you know, we've got Mark Sutcliffe about to unveil a financial plan. Catherine McKenney said 3% every year at this point. What I'm hearing is, you know, can't say beyond year 1 when we'll have a freeze, but.
Yeah. We had a system whereby it was automatic. It's going to go up 2% a year, 2% a year, 2% a year, 2% a year, and it was spent on a lot of things, a lot of good things, and a lot of things did not receive any funding, like roads, okay? So there's a lot of balancing that has to be done when you're putting together a budget. Why are the roads in such bad condition as they're in right now? Because Jim Watson decided to do it. It's a decision that was made.
So it would be a year-by-year process.
It would be a year-by-year process. It has to be a year-by-year process.
How does a freeze on year 1, how does that not lead to pressure for things like layoffs? I mean, the city finances, you're saying, are in pretty tough shape.
So we're not, it's not.
The debt is awful.
It's not based on layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not based on layoffs. It's based on what you don't do. There's a lot of things. I had a list of all things here that I wouldn't be doing anyway.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, theoretically, the city could decide to do an arena that costs $250 million instead of $300. Is that not a fair question? I mean, but that's type of decision making. They put a price tag of $332 million on building a new arena as part of the Lansdowne initiative. Does it have to be that? Or does it even have to be there? They could build a new arena somewhere else. Maybe not as expensive. So you have all kinds of choices to make when you're going through that process. And we made choices in the city, as I mentioned, for public-private partnerships, which cost us a lot less because they're financed over a long period of time. Part of the financing comes from the developer, and so on and so forth. So if they're done judiciously, they make sense. Why did we do those 4 or 5 projects I mentioned, which were very, very community-oriented? Why did we do them?
So are you prepared on something like Lansdowne to watch OSEG maybe walk away from that if you delay, if you did not, in fact, come through with $330 million?
Right now, it's a matter of when. Is there any reason why? Let me roll it back for a minute. The arena that we have now could last another 3 or 4 years. It doesn't have to be built now. So that's 3 or 4 years where you're not borrowing $332 million to move forward. So there are so many options available to have a reasonable, responsible budget come together. There are all kinds of elements to it.
All right. I think we're coming close to end of time, but I did want to just ask you about something else that had to do with your environmental positions. You're talking about, of course, Ottawa's perennial waste disposal problem, the Trail Road landfill and what happens there. And you suggested sending this problem over to Hydro Ottawa to do a study on it. You were also talking about greenhouse gas emissions, and you suggested having Hydro Ottawa study that because it's an independent body, and so it might make some sense. From the point of view of at least this taxpayer, it also looks like kind of outsourcing the solutions to the problem, right? Saying, okay, we'll get some independent body to look at it, and then we don't have to do that kind of thing. So I guess I'm challenging you a little bit on the wisdom of having some body that is not the elected council coming up with the solutions to these rather important and somewhat intractable problems.
There's something that's gone out today, or is going out tomorrow, in the next day or two, on that. As Minister of Energy, I was aware of the fact. In fact, on the fringe of it, was involved with it somewhat. And that is that the City of Kingston and the City of Peterborough consolidated all of their services that are provided by the city. So if you're looking at taxes, you're looking at fees that are paid for various things, etc. They consolidated them all, and they consolidated them into their energy company. They had the administrative ability to do it. So if you look at Kingston and Peterborough, when you're paying your fines and when you're paying your electricity, you're paying your taxes, it's all consolidated. So instead of having 4 or 5 centers of employment, you reduce that to one place where they do it. They've been doing that, and they've been doing it very, very successfully. So most of the municipal electricity distribution companies, so when I was Minister of Energy, I think we had 56 of them across the province, okay? And they also have access to ISO, Independent Electricity System Operator, for funds for various projects, which could involve things like carbon reduction. So I had a discussion with somebody very, very senior at Hydro Ottawa, and I wrote a note down here, and I actually kept a letter I got. Following a discussion with a very senior executive at Hydro Ottawa on the subject of carbon reduction, he texted me saying, "As you know, there's a lot of very low-hanging fruit at the municipal level carbon reduction. Even without getting to transportation, which is obviously the big one, lighting, building, retrofits, life cycle management, etc., would be substantial carbon reduction and cost savings. Have been trying to convince the city to set up a fund that we can use to target greenhouse gas reductions and to use the dollars saved to reinvest in energy gas projects." Okay? And I do know that there's another 1 or 2 of the energy companies who have gone forward with something like that.
So you're saying it's not without precedent, basically?
The city wasn't interested.
Okay. All right.
The city wasn't interested.
All right. So you would revisit because there are other precedents to do it,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Did you ask about Wellington Street?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to ask you about Wellington Street. Maybe we can even make it a wrap-up question for you. Because we're asking everybody, what's the future of Wellington Street when you're the mayor? Are you going to reopen it? What are you going to do?
I wouldn't make a decision without further study, because if you close it, now just imagine Metcalfe or Bank Street. Cars are coming down. It's a dead end at Wellington. It's a dead end there. It's a dead end there. Just imagine the traffic flow now that you have people coming from Rideau Street.
Nobody has to imagine it. That's what's happening, right?
No, I realize
Yeah.
that, okay? But then you're going to jam the traffic on the other streets. So I wouldn't consider doing anything unless I had a study as to how it could be done. Full
As to
stop.
how what could be done.
Closing Wellington Street.
But that is the status quo right now, and knowing what we know about government, it will be the status quo for years to come. So you don't need to study closing it, it's closed. I guess the question is, what do you do to it
It's
next?
not-
Can you
it's not-
reopen
it's
it?
not
Can
per-
you?
It's not permanently closed. It's a city road.
It is a city road.
Yeah,
It's been closed with no, I would say, no sunlight on anyone wanting to make a decision about what they will now do with that road.
Well, presumably there was very little collaboration between the federal government responsible for Parliament Hill. And so there's no. I don't have a quick answer to every issue. So I'm saying I wouldn't keep it closed, okay, indefinitely. I wouldn't necessarily open it. I would want to have a traffic study. I would want to have collaboration with the management of Parliament Hill, and have some public input as well.
I know that you mentioned Yasser Naqvi a couple of times. I know he has a little study underway about things like Wellington and the future of downtown. Has he given you any inkling as to what his study group is coming up with so far?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. Time is running out. Are there last queries from people? Yes, Joanne.
And I know we've discussed this when we did our interview last week, Mr. Chiarelli, but you turned 81 a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
What would you tell voters who ask whether your age is a factor in this election?
Oh, I might say a couple of things. I might say, John Baird was elected when he was 25. Hazel McCallion was mayor when she was 93 years of age. I'm somewhere in between. Do I look like I'm over the hill? You don't have to answer that.
If you win this election, would you seek another term?
Probably not, but I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. But probably not.
You would see yourself as the guy who reintroduces consensus, facilitation, and gets the books in orders.
Yeah, more than that. More than that. It's getting some things done. I've had some discussions with Mr. Crockett on how to improve tourism. A tourism site and tourism operation in the east and one in the west. It's brainstorming. He thought it had some merit. I try to be creative when I can. Tourism industry is based exclusively on being a capital city. We can do a lot better than that.
Okay. Last words, anyone? No, other than thank you very much for your patience, that P on the forehead,
Okay.
and your time today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.